In the heart of the Savanna, the laws of nature are written in blood. But tonight, those laws are about to be rewritten. Left for dead by the one person she trusted, Hannah Carter sat in the dust with her newborn son, waiting for the shadows to claim them. But what emerged from the grass wasn't a monster. It was a guardian with eyes like molten ember. Stay with us as we reveal the miracle of Solara, the lioness who stood against the dark to save a human life. Chapter 1, The Shattered Promise. In the small, sun-drenched village where Hannah Carter spent her youth, life felt like a predictable fairy tale. She had married Ryan, a man whose smile seemed to hold the warmth of 1,000 summer days and whose laughter was as infectious as a cheering charm. Their wedding was a whirlwind of white lace and golden light, a day where promises were exchanged, like sacred relics. They spoke of forever with the casual confidence of those who have never known a storm, convinced that their love was a fortress that no ill wind could ever shake. But as the seasons turned, a shadow began to stretch across their threshold, long and cold. When Hannah discovered she was carrying a child, the joy that should have filled their home was replaced by a creeping, suffocating silence. Ryan's warmth began to ebb away, replaced by a hollow frustration that he couldn't quite name. He looked at the growing life within her not as a miracle, but as a complication to the life he had planned. The distance between them grew until it felt like an ocean, leaving Hannah to navigate the growing mystery of motherhood in a house that had become a tomb of unspoken words. The nursery, once a place of whispered dreams, became a gallery of Ryan's mounting resentment. He moved through the rooms like a man haunted by a ghost he hadn't yet buried, his eyes avoiding Hannah's, as if her very presence were a reminder of a debt he didn't want to pay. Hannah tried to bridge the gap with kindness, but every soft word was met with a jagged edge. She watched the man she loved transform into a stranger, his features sharpening with a bitterness that made his handsome face look like a mask of carved stone. The village gossip, once a distant hum, now felt like a buzzing swarm of hornets, each rumor adding a layer of lead to her heart. The nights were the hardest, filled with the sound of Ryan's restless pacing, and the heavy, rhythmic ticking of a clock that seemed to be counting down to a disaster she couldn't name. Hannah would lie awake, her hand on her stomach, feeling the tiny flutters of life, and wondering how a world that had started so brightly could be fading into such an ashen gray. She felt as though she were walking through a forest where the trees were slowly turning into iron. When the news of the pregnancy had first broken, she thought it would be their salvation. Instead, it was the catalyst for a slow-motion collapse. Ryan began to spend more time away, his excuses as thin as parchment, while Hannah sat by the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon, and feeling the first true chill of a winter that was arriving far too early in her life. Chapter 2, The Weight of the Heavens. The arrival of baby Noah was a miracle wrapped in a small blue blanket, but it came with a heavy, agonizing price. A complication during the birth left Hannah in a wheelchair. Her world suddenly narrowed to the height of a seated perspective. While she poured every ounce of her remaining strength into caring for her son, Ryan became a ghost in his own house, his footsteps echoing with a bitter resentment. He didn't see the bravery in her daily struggles. He only saw the burden of her recovery. One moonless night, fueled by a cowardice that had finally curdled into pure malice, Ryan decided to end his perceived burden. He lured Hannah and the child into the truck, whispering lies about a fresh start under the stars where the air was clean and the future was bright. He drove them far beyond the safety of the streetlights, past the last flickering signs of civilization, and deep into the heart of the Savanna. The road became a memory of dust, and the silence of the wilderness began to press against the windows of the truck. Ryan stopped the vehicle in a place where the grass grew tall and the shadows were thick with ancient secrets. Without a word of apology or a flicker of regret, he forced the wheelchair and the small bundle containing Noah out into the dirt. He didn't look back as he climbed back into the driver's seat. The engine roared to life, a violent intrusion into the stillness of the plains. The red glow of his taillights vanished into the dark like twin malevolent eyes, leaving a mother and her newborn to face the vast, uncaring silence of the night. Hannah sat in the dust, her hands frozen on the wheels of her chair, feeling the weight of the heavens pressing down on her. The betrayal was so total, it felt as though the very earth had been pulled from beneath her. The Savanna at night is not truly silent. It is a symphony of rustles, clicks, and distant, haunting calls. To Hannah, every sound was a threat, every movement in the grass a potential end to her story. She clutched Noah tighter, her body acting as a fragile fortress against the encroaching dark. A smell of parched earth and wild grass filled her lungs, a scent that now represented the edge of the world. She realized then that Ryan hadn't just left her. He had tried to erase her. In the eyes of the law, they were missing. But in the heart of the wild, they were simply prey. She looked up at the stars, which seemed so bright and yet so impossibly far away, and whispered a prayer that felt more like a bargain with a universe she no longer understood. Chapter 3. The Amber-Eyed Sentinel. As the temperature dropped and the stars began to watch with cold, distant eyes, Hannah clutched Noah to her chest, her heart drumming a frantic rhythm against the stillness. The Savanna at night was a place of shifting shadows and half-heard whispers, a realm where the laws of man held no sway. The tall grass began to ripple, a movement so subtle it was more felt than seen, as if the earth itself were breathing in a slow, rhythmic trance. Hannah held her breath, her hand trembling as she stroked Noah's soft cheek, bracing herself for whatever stepped out of the gloom. She had heard stories of the predators that prowled these plains, creatures of muscle and tooth that moved like liquid shadow. Her imagination populated the dark with claws and glowing eyes, each snapping twig sounding like a death warrant. Then she appeared, a lioness, old and scarred by a lifetime of survival, stepped into the pale, silvery moonlight. Her fur was the color of parched earth, and her eyes held the deep, knowing amber of a wizard's stone. She moved with a heavy, regal grace that suggested she was not just an animal, but a sovereign of this particular patch of the world. Hannah squeezed her eyes shut, her soul recoiling as she waited for the strike of a predator. She prepared herself for the pain, for the loss, and for the finality of a life cut short by a husband's cruelty. But the expected violence never came. Instead, the great beast let out a low, vibrating huff of air, a sound of recognition rather than hunger. With a grace that felt almost holy, the lioness sat down beside the wheelchair, her massive, warm body acting as a living shield against the biting wind. The heat radiating from the beast was like the warmth of a hearth fire, a physical presence that pushed back the chill of the night. Hannah opened her eyes and looked into the amber depths of the lioness's gaze, finding a strange, ancient peace. For a long time, neither moved. The lioness rested her head on her paws, her ears twitching occasionally at the sounds of the night, while Hannah leaned slightly toward the golden fur. It was a pact made in silence, a bridge built across the gap between species. In that moment, the wheelchair was no longer a symbol of disability, but a throne guarded by a queen. Chapter 4. The Shield of the Savanna. The night was not without its monsters, and the darkness soon began to laugh. From the fringes of the moonlight came the low, mocking cackle of hyenas, their eyes gleaming with a cruel, opportunistic light. They circled the small island of warmth, sensing the vulnerability of the human mother and her helpless child. They moved in closer, their jagged teeth bared in the dark, confident that the night belonged to them. Hannah's breath hitched in her throat as she realized the peril they were in. The hyenas were like shadows given form, their movements erratic and menacing. They knew the lioness was old, and they hoped their numbers would give them the courage to snatch the prize from the Golden Guardian's side. The atmosphere turned thick with the scent of musk and the threat of blood. The lioness, whose name was Solara in the language of the wind, stood her ground. She rose to her full, imposing height, her muscles bunching beneath her golden hide like coiled lightning. She didn't growl at first. She simply stared, a look of such concentrated power that the lead hyena faltered in its tracks. She was a wall of gold against the tide of shadow. When the scavengers dared a step too close, Solara let out a roar that seemed to shake the very foundations of the earth. It was a sound so full of ancient authority that the hyenas vanished back into the gloom like smoke. The roar echoed across the plains, a declaration that this territory and the lives within it were under her protection. For the rest of the night, the predator became the protector, keeping a silent, golden-eyed vigil over the two lives that the rest of the world had discarded. Solara paced in slow, measured circles around the wheelchair, her tail occasionally brushing against the metal frame. She was a sentinel at the gates of the wild, and she would allow no harm to pass through her watch. Hannah watched the lioness, her fear slowly being replaced by a sense of awe. She realized that she was witnessing a miracle, a moment where the natural order was suspended in favor of a higher, unwritten law. The night, which had started as a journey toward death, had become a lesson in the unexpected mercy of the universe. Chapter 5. The Path to the Sun. When the first rays of dawn began to paint the horizon in shades of copper and rose, the Savanna underwent a transformation. The shadows retracted and the golden grass began to glow with a soft, ethereal light. The air grew warmer, smelling of dew and distant rain. The lioness stood up, her duty complete, and shook the dust from her mane with a majestic flick of her head. The sound of an engine broke the morning air, cutting through the mist like a ship through water. A ranger's vehicle appeared, a mechanical beetle in the vast landscape. Inside was a man who had spent his life studying the mysteries of the wild, and what he saw through his binoculars would stay with him until the end of his days. As the humans approached, Solara didn't growl or flee in a panic. She gave one final, knowing look at the mother she had guarded, a look that held a lifetime of shared secrets and a deep, unspoken bond. Then, with the effortless grace of a ghost, she vanished into the golden sea of grass, leaving only the memory of her warmth and the faint scent of wild rosemary behind. Hannah and Noah were rescued, their story of survival becoming a legend that crossed oceans and mended broken spirits. The world was shocked by the tale of the lioness of the plains, and Ryan Carter's cowardice was finally brought to light. But for Hannah, the victory wasn't just in the survival. It was in the transformation that had taken place during those long, dark hours. Months later, as Hannah took her first trembling steps in a rehabilitation center, she looked at a photograph on the wall. A lioness resting beneath an acacia tree. She knew that she wasn't just walking for herself. She was walking for the guardian who had shown her that even in the darkest wilderness, compassion is the strongest magic of all. Her legs were weak, but her spirit was as strong as a lion's. Ryan's betrayal had left her in the dark, but Solara's mercy had led her back into the light. She realized that the world is far more mysterious and kind than we often dare to believe, and that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who sit at our own dinner tables, while the true guardians are the ones we once feared the most. A lioness showed mercy when a human showed none. Does this change how you look at the wild? Tell us your thoughts in the comments and leave a like if you believe that compassion is the strongest magic of all. Your support helps us bring these voices of the wilderness to the world.